First of all, I'll start off by saying what I'm not going to say tonight. This is not going to be a catalogue which you might read in tomorrow's paper of the events of 2017 and the hurricanes and the typhoons and the car crashes and the junkies driving into people on the road and all the usual calamities, because they occur all the time. And if at 1 minute past midnight everybody is revelling in the streets of Adelaide and almost every city of the world, calling into account, of course, time differences, believe me, tomorrow will dawn the same as any other day. And 2008, unless it brings the return of Jesus Christ to the earth, despite all the great prospects and hopes, will turn out to be exactly the same as 2017, believe you me. Why? Because man will not change until something happens to change him. So everything I say tonight will be related to events which have happened in 2017, some of them before, which have the possibility, the prospect, or have already changed the world. Changed the world. And have pointed forward to the fact that a greater change is coming, even the Lord Jesus Christ. Now, I'll just put this slide up and quickly look at it, because we're going to deal with this again further on in our address. But one of these great signs came very late in the year. I think it was the 7th of December, when Donald Trump staggered the world by saying the American embassy would be shifted to Jerusalem because Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. Oh, my goodness. Everyone went up in flames. The Prime Minister of Israel said, well, we had a kingdom here 3,000 years ago. Of course it's our land, and Jerusalem our capital city. Mr. Netanyahu was wrong. They had a king in Jerusalem in Genesis chapter 14. Over 1,000 years before David. He was called Melchizedek. He was a priest and king of the Most High God. Jerusalem has connections that go back that far. Now, this is a prophecy in Zechariah saying that God will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling. Interesting word, because it can mean trembling, but trembling is a consequence of something. Either inebriation, can mean to stagger or tremble in drunkenness, or the effects of poison. You drink something and it has great consequences. And you can't walk and you can't think and you stagger and tremble. Unto all people round about. Okay, that's round about Jerusalem. In the immediate proximity of Jerusalem itself, the nations around, Syria, Lebanon, and other nations, down in the Gaza Strip, round about Jerusalem. And in that day I'll make Jerusalem a burdensome stone, very heavy stone. You try to shift it, you can't lift it, it's too heavy. And in fact, you drop it and it falls on you. And it will cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered. So we've gone from around about Jerusalem to all the people of the earth affected by what will happen around Jerusalem. First 3 slides, I want to talk about the Bible very quickly, and it will be a short version, but they're very important things. The events of 2017 confirm prophecies of the Bible. The most important prophecy is that of the return of the Lord Jesus Christ. And of course, as Brother Greg mentioned, that reading was direct from the lips of Jesus himself. So it must have, if you can possibly say this, even greater force than the prophets that came before. And they are powerful enough and clear enough in their message. But Jesus is potently clear about his coming and the signs. Is Jesus coming back to the earth? I'm just going to select out of about 300 references, either plain or inferred in the New Testament, that state that Jesus will come back. This same Jesus shall so come in like manner as you've seen him go into heaven. spoken by the angels to his disciples as he left the earth. Acts 3, he shall send Jesus Christ, which before was preached unto you, whom the heaven must receive until the times of refreshing come from the presence of the Lord. 2 Thessalonians, the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Revelation 22, the words of Jesus. Behold, I come quickly or suddenly, unexpectedly. All through the Gospels, more than once, he said he's going to come as a thief. Some people are going to be caught out completely. I come suddenly, and my reward is with me to give to every man according as his work shall be. So Jesus is coming, and his work's going to be to judge those who are worthy to be his fellow heirs of the kingdom he will establish. That reading which we had can be summarised if you've still got your Bible open. We're not going to go right through it. As I said, this is shorthand. The first thing in those first few verses which Greg read, it talks about the fall of Israel, of Jerusalem, before the Roman invasion of AD 70, the destruction of Jerusalem and the exile of the Jewish people. And he tells his disciples that when they see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, get out. And those who stayed, of course, history records, were subject to one of the most terrible sieges in the history of the world. But there was a limit Jesus put on that, and of course, in verse 24, Jerusalem shall be trodden down of non-Jewish people, Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. So there was a terminal date, which Jesus talks about, when Jerusalem will return from non-Jewish people controlling it to Jewish people controlling it. Now, Jesus has put us right up to date here because that's what's happening right now. That's what the argument is about. Who controls Jerusalem? Chaotic state of the world, Jesus says. When he comes, there's going to be terrible distress. In verse 25, distress of nations with perplexity. The word perplexity means no way, literally no way. And you've got to provide the subject. No way of escape, no way out, no solution, nothing. Brick wall, no way around it. And I think you can see in some parts of the world already that occurring. And fear, men's hearts failing them for fear. I think we've seen terrorism inject a sort of fear into people, and I know the one latest in Melbourne is the other problem of this world right now is people whose brains are addled with methamphetamine. And that's frightening. You drive along the road today. There were two terrible crashes in Australia, one in Victoria and one in New South Wales over this weekend. With the car travelling so fast, it was cut in halves. Killed people coming the other way. It was on the wrong side of the road, and the bodies were incinerated, so the police did not even know whether it was a man and a woman in that car. The driver was previously convicted of drug offences. That's the world we live in. That's the world that Jesus said it's going to be perplexity, no way out, and it's going to put people in fear. What else did Jesus say? Restoration of Israel. He spoke to them, behold the fig tree in verse 29. The fig tree is a symbol of Israel in 2 or 3 places, but Hosea 9 says, I found your fathers in the wilderness like the first ripe grapes and the early fig. So the fig tree. Jesus cursed the fig tree because it didn't have fruit on it. It represented Israel. Israel's been restored to the land and has been a nation since 1948. And Jesus said, when you see these things, you know that the kingdom of God is near at hand. Now we're 70 years on from that event. But remember that time to God is a blink or less than it. So we're in an era of Christ's return. And finally, the warning to his disciples to take heed to yourselves, lest at any time you're overcharged with excessive living, surfeiting, excessive living, drunkenness, cares of this life, and that day come upon you unawares, for as a snare shall it come on all them that dwell on the face of the earth. Jesus is there quoting, we won't turn to it, from Isaiah 24, which pictures the world reeling like a drunk man, and everybody affected, unsustainable. As the buyer, so will the seller. He who gives usury, so he that takes usury. As the master, so the servant. No one's privileged. Everyone will be caught in this. And Isaiah says they'll fall into a pit and clamber out, and a snare will drop on top of them. Jesus has already mentioned drunkenness and snare as Isaiah. He's quoting from Isaiah, which is a hopeless condition. But Isaiah finishes up with Christ reigning before his ancients gloriously in Jerusalem. So Jesus is quoting from the Old Testament prophecies and warning us of future events. Now, just a quick run through to show you everything I'm going to say tonight. God is in control. Daniel was a young Jew. He was exiled in Babylon as Nebuchadnezzar brought Babylon to be the power that dominated the then earth. And he interpreted a dream which the king of Babylon saw. And I'm going to just quickly tell you about it, just to bring out a couple of points about the end of that dream. Because this is the pattern of all Bible prophecy. Everything you see happening in the world and the things we talk about tonight in Europe, the Middle East, can all be compressed back into that template, that plan. And here's how it goes. Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar, you're the head of gold. So we know that Nebuchadnezzar starts this sequence off. Succeeded by silver, which was the Persians who conquered Babylon, and the bronze represented the Greeks. Alexander the Great defeated the Persians in 3 great battles by 333 BC. And then came Rome into the area of Europe, the Middle East and North Africa, dominating most of the important parts of the world. People say, well, what about the other empires, the Dutch Empire, the Portuguese and so forth? God is only concerned with empires that affected either the Jewish people or the followers of Jesus. So people that God's interested in, those empires affected. And that's the way history has gone. It finishes up with clay mixed with iron, which doesn't mix. They shall not cleave to the other, one to the other. And that's the effect of the Roman Empire being conquered by barbarians from outside the Roman Empire, forming 10 independent kingdoms, like the Franks and the Huns and all these people you read about in the history book, which formed the foundation of modern Europe. So, there's the medals, and there's the interpretation, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and a divided Europe. But there's 3 verses in that chapter which are vital to understand. And I'm going to show you a minute before I have to describe what that stone's doing there. Daniel was told, it tells the king, that you saw a stone cut out of the mountain without hands. There was no human hands that did it. It represents the Lord Jesus Christ, who was brought into the world by God, producing a son from Mary. And that stone would smite the image, smash it, and grind it to powder and blow it away. And it would grow and grow and grow till it filled the whole earth. Now, this is a successive list of things. 1, 2, one after the other. So it's never existed. Because when the Persians came along, this one's gone. When the Greeks conquered Persia, that one's gone. So somebody, some nation has to whirl that all together and stand it up so that when Jesus comes, Europe is divided, partly strong and partly weak, and some power's got to occupy all the territories of those ancient kingdoms. Otherwise the prophecy is meaningless. And here's the vital words that we have to understand. It will happen, King Nebuchadnezzar, in the latter days. So it's not just a succession empire, it's one single event's going to happen in the latter days, when that whole image stands again and is struck by Jesus Christ, the little stone. Secondly, it's broken to pieces together, which reaffirms what I just said. And here's the important thing, which will bear on what I'm going to say about world events. In it will be the strength of the iron. Rome does not totally disappear. But it does. There's no Roman Empire. The Italians aren't ancient Romans, even though they live in Italy. Rome's gone. But Rome gave the world a form of Christianity which was not the true Christianity which Jesus founded. And that refers to the Roman Church, which exists till this day. There will always be in it the strength of the iron. So, that's the pattern of prophecy. Now, let's go on to some of the events. On November the 2nd was... I'm going to talk about anniversaries for a while, not wedding anniversaries or birthdays, but great events. This one occurred on the November the 2nd, 100 years ago, and this is the so-called Balfour Declaration. The two gentlemen are Lord Balfour, Foreign Secretary of the British government in 1917, 100 years ago. And this is Chaim Weizmann, the brilliant scientist, a Jewish chemist. And this is the famous Balfour Declaration. Now, this is an amazing document. It's written by an old typewriter. It's on probably an A4 piece of paper. It has no legal standing. It's a letter to Lord Rothschild. It's not a document. It's not a legal thing. It's not a government-endorsed thing at all. It's a piece of paper. But that gave birth to the nation of Israel. Because the British government view with favour the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. And they'll do their best endeavours to achieve it. But don't prejudice the civil and religious rights of the existing non-Jewish communities. So the Arab-Jew thing began there. The Arabs call that a cursed paper. They hold a special day to denounce the Balfour Declaration, but it happened. The stubborn fact is that it gave birth to the nation of Israel and the turn of the Jewish people. I want to impress on you the way God works with incidental, tiny little events. Stupid little things. A tea party, a haberdashery shop. I'll explain what I mean as we go. But God works in strange ways. You see, Weizmann was a chemist in Manchester, the university. He was experimenting on producing acetone from bacteria fermentation of carbohydrates in things that starch and sugars which occur in plants. Britain was running out of gunpowder in the First World War, and acetone is a vital ingredient of explosives. Today they make it from petroleum fractions, but not then. And his wife, Vera, was also a chemist, and they were at a tea party. And they were introduced to a Mr. Scott, the editor of the Manchester Guardian, and he asked him what Weizmann was doing. He told him, he said, "Oh, I'll get you to meet Lord Balfour. He'd be interested in this." Well, the rest happened. And the other trivial little thing was a little Sunday school in Wales, in a tiny little village, where a little boy called Lloyd George went to school, and he went to church. And the minister of the church, as he grew up, showed him in the Bible that God is going to return the Jewish people to the land. He that scattered Israel will gather him. So Lloyd George grew up believing in the return of the Jews. Britain's got a prime minister. He's making a hash of it. In 1915, Lloyd George becomes prime minister. Balfour tells Lloyd George about Weizmann. You have two Jewish sympathies now in power. And that letter to the president of the Zionist organisation. Just trivial little things. Little Sunday school in Wales, a tea party, bringing these men together. And it doesn't stop there, because that's not a legal document. It has to go to the British Parliament. Who stands up and defends the idea of a homeland? Winston Churchill. Who went to the League of Nations to plead the Jews' cause and say, it's their right from the time of Joshua's conquest of Canaan. That were the words of Churchill. From Joshua's conquest of Canaan, it's their right. Three men, sliver of time, right people, right time. The hand of God working among the nations. Then, of course, on December, a few weeks ago, we had the 100th anniversary of General Allenby coming into Jerusalem. Again, happenstance, you like. Archibald Murray was the general in charge of the expeditionary forces in the Middle East. The Turkish Empire covered all that area, Palestine and a lot of the Middle East, including places like Saudi Arabia and Syria. So the Turks owned the place. Archibald Murray was the general who was given the job of attacking Gaza. And the governor of Gaza came out and said the Turks are ready to surrender. Murray said, oh, I don't trust it, and raised the siege and withdrew. And the Turks were given respite. He had a mental breakdown, actually. He had to come back to London. And the British government sent Allenby, who'd always been distinguished in his service. And he had a knock on the door, and Lord Delisle came to visit him, Earl Lord Delisle. One of his relatives became Governor-General of Australia. Some of us older ones might remember the Governor-General Delisle. And he knew the Bible. And he said, Edmund, you're going out to command the British forces and you're going to fulfil destiny. Have a look at these prophecies in the Bible. Jerusalem has to be taken from the Turks and the Jews have to go home. And he knew, of course, of December. Of course, this is only weeks after the Balfour Declaration, so everything's coming together. And of course, the Turks vacated Jerusalem and Allenby walked in without a shot being fired. So the Turks were out of the Middle East and the Jews could return to their homeland. But it wasn't all wonderful, as we know. The Arab situation arose, the Holocaust arose, and we now come to the post-war, and we're jumping to 1967. We'll go back a bit in a minute. But the other anniversary, of course, in 2017 was June the 6th. And the Six-Day War, 50 years ago, when the Israeli troops reached the Western Wall, great symbol to Israel, where the temple stood, and secured it for Israel, and Jerusalem came into Jewish hands. And there they are at some of the famous photos of the infantrymen who fought street by street, building by building, to get into eastern Jerusalem, because Israel were only given half of Jerusalem in the settlement of 1947, which we'll talk about next. Now, it's interesting, isn't it? Who were they fighting? Who were they fighting? Palestinians? Palestinians say, we've got a right to this city, we've been here, we own. No, they were fighting Jordan. Jordan owned the eastern Jerusalem. Jordan did. Nothing to do with the Palestinians. Jordan. They were fighting Jordan out of that thing. That's why it took quite a fight, because the Jordanian army was pretty good. So it came into the Jewish hands. Preceding that, of course, was the anniversary of the nation of Israel and the city of Jerusalem. This is, I think I might have these slides back to front, but never mind. The other great anniversary was November the 29th, which was 70 years since the United States vote giving the Jews a homeland, the partition of the land between Jew and Arab. Again, miraculous, miraculous. Let's go to November the 26th. They put a test vote into what was called it was a primary committee, the committee phase. This is not the General Assembly with all the nations, but represents the nations there. The result of the vote, no hope. No hope of Israel having that land. No. They tried it again. No. But the Jews had a great trump card. Jewish espionage didn't begin with Mossad. All through the Holocaust, they had to be good at espionage. All through the 1930s. And they had spies down in South America who remained neutral. But the Nazis were swarming down there, not only during the war, but after the war. You know, as well as I do, Brazil, Argentina, sheltered the Nazi war criminals after the war. So they were not sympathetic to Jews. Down there was Nelson Rockefeller, who became governor of New York. And he was in charge of affairs preserving American business interests. They were all there. Every nation was down there. It was neutral. And they'd often go out to dinner and the Nazi spies were sitting over in the same restaurant. That's how it was. But the Jews knew that Standard Oil was shipping oil out of the South American ports to Spain, which was neutral. But it was going across the border into Germany and going into German tanks and aeroplanes. That's the dirtiness of war. Everyone's making money out of war. So between the 26th of November and the 29th, a deputation of Zionists flew to New York. I forget it, I think Golda Meir might have been one of them. And they knocked on Rockefeller's door, not literally. He said he didn't want to see them. They said, if you don't, what we've got will be on the pages of the Washington Post and New York Times tomorrow morning. He said, that's blackmail. They said, exactly. What do you want? You've got great influence in Latin America. We want 4 votes from South America to make the third, 2/3 to get in. He got them. 29th of November, miraculously, that vote went through 39-13. And the Jews were allowed to return. But what about their state? That wasn't a form of state at that stage. They needed America's support. President Truman was President of America. He'd had enough of Zionists. But he had a habit, before he was president, he was a salesman selling haberdashery, clothes and things. And he had a very good friend called Benny Jacobson, who he always said, forget I'm president, Benny, any time you need a favour, give me a ring. So he gave him a ring. I want you to see Mr. Weissman. No, he's the last man I want to see. He said, I'm facing an election in May. I've got I think it was 25% approval, worse than Mr. Wetherell. I can't risk this. I can't risk it. Mr. Turnbull, I mean. I can't risk this. I don't want to see him. Benny Jacobs said, please, just talk to Mr. Weissman. Now, Chaim Weissman, by the way, the name Chaim means life. At a Jewish wedding, they toast a glass and say, Chaim, to life. And Weissman gave life to the Jewish nation. So we went and saw Truman. We want a state. Told him a story. But he was touched. Truman was touched. And America voted yes for a state of Israel. See, just a haberdashery shop, a salesman, an old friend, a tea party, Sunday school in Wales. Everything's coming together under God's control. Marvellous. Well, we're up to the present now. Trump announces his intention to recognise Jerusalem. Bombshell. I've determined that it's time to officially recognise Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, whilst previous presidents have made this a campaign promise. See, it wasn't Trump's idea. It was it'd been legislated, but no one was game to do it. Bush wouldn't do it. Obama, he wouldn't do it in a fit, because his sympathies are with the Arabs, as we all know. They've failed to deliver. Today, I'm delivering. I rang a Christadelphian friend of mine, and some of you know him, in New York, and said, "What do you make of this, David?" He said, "I'll tell you something about Trump. He'll do it. He'll do it. He'll take all the risks. What about the tax thing?" He said, "Well, it's Friday evening over here, and all the break-up parties are on in the work." He works on the stock exchange. All the parties are on. And the executives of Walmart and others are standing up and saying, "Boys and girls, can I have your attention? 2018, the bonuses will be bigger." So instantly, Trump's decision is flowing on into the commercial world. That's just an aside, but that's fresh from New York. I won't read it in the paper. And I'm not a reporter. There's the embassy in Tel Aviv. So he's put the proverbial cat among the pigeons. So what happened in the United Nations? Well, I think we know. We can skip over this pretty fast. Well, it caused a furore in the United Nations. But the veto was not... the resolution condemning Israel was not passed because condemning the US resolution was not passed because the US has the right of veto. It's in the Security Council. What a useless organisation who can argue for days and weeks, and then about one nation can say, "Nope." They call it democracy. I mean, it's a farce. Here's Nikki Haley. I must confess, I like this lady, not only because she's quite attractive, but but to listen to her is a lesson in avoidance of non-political garbage. She talks straight, and she listened to all these nations condemning Israel and the United States, and she stood up. Well, she didn't. She sat there from... Yeah, that's taken at the actual day. And she said, "Well, I've heard you all, and we've got your names." Now, this morning on the news, Trump indicated to Mahmoud Abbas for his provocative response of saying to the Palestinians, "Get out in the street for 3 days." And if you go on the internet, you'll see a video clip of all these Palestinians getting stuck into 2 Israeli soldiers. Now, they're armed. But the commander of the IDF said, "Do not react." And there's this girl biting the soldier's arm. Oh, taking a great hunk out of his arm. There's 2 youths holding the other one, banging into him. Now, these are tough Israeli soldiers. If they saw the training that these Israeli soldiers go through, they'd be very reticent to do that. But they did not respond. And they could take the punishment. Do you know Israeli soldiers are trained to take punishment? They stand up there and they belt them as though they're being tortured. They go through all the things that they go through if they're captured. So these people were just mosquitoes. But it made the Palestinians backed off because it wasn't causing all the chaos they expected to cause. And Nikki Haley said, "We've got your names." And Trump is already saying, "We're not giving you money, we're withdrawing our aid to you." And he did this, I believe, this morning, or threatened to Mahmoud Abbas. So, America's sticking up for itself and is sticking up for Israel. "Whoever blesses you," God said to Abraham, "I will bless, and whoever curses you, I will curse." And I can confidently say we're going to see that. You know, Britain actually didn't stand with America. It supported the resolution. They'll pay for that. And I'm rather surprised Theresa May took that stand. I love Trump's comment. "They take hundreds of millions from us, billions, and we're watching those who voted for the resolution. We're watching you." In other words, he's not an Obama. He's not going to walk away with his tail between his legs. These events will bring on the biblical Armageddon spoken of by Jesus in the book of Revelation. Revelation says he's going to gather the nations to a place called in the Hebrew tongue. It's going to be in Israel. The Hebrew tongue, Armageddon. What's Armageddon mean? Well, Armageddon has a 3 Hebrew word structure. Arma meaning a heap, mainly of something like a sheaf in a harvest, Gi a valley, and Don judgment. A heap of sheaves in a valley for judgment. Now here's your quote, which is the most important quote pertinent to our particular days. Behold, in those days and at that time. So we say, hey, we've got to listen to this because Job's going to give us a time frame. Joel. When I bring again the captivity of Judah, the people, the return of the people to the land, through the 40s, 50s, 1948, the nation was formed. I'll gather all nations, everyone's involved, which we had in the early slide, and bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, which means the judgment of God. And I'll plead with them there for my people and my heritage, Israel. Do you notice that? See, it's not like we're anti-Arabs. If an Arab was sitting here, we'd respect them. But the argument is over. My people, my heritage. And there's one more my. And whom they've scattered among the nations and parted my land. So there's the UN, 180 nations, or what it is, 150. And all arguing about whose land it is. The Bible says it's God's land. It's not even the Jews' lands, it's God's. And he's given it to them because of promises made. So that's the meaning of Armageddon, judgment. And in this further passage in verse 12, let the nations be wakened, come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there will I sit to judge. Valley, judge, for the harvest is ripe. Put in the sickle. The harvest, the sheaves, put in the sickle. So there's your meaning of Armageddon. That's the explanation of Armageddon. The harvest is ripe, come down, the press is full, for the fats overflow, for their wickedness is great. God's going to judge the nations. Zechariah told us that. He's going to bring them all to Jerusalem. There is going to be a war, World War III. It's going to be fought in Israel. All nations are going to be involved. And there's going to be sides. Who's going to be the protagonist? Russia. They held the biggest exercises they've ever held. Something like 7,000 infantry, tanks, planes on the border of the Baltic states. The Lithuanians and the Estonians and the Latvians are terrified. They've got booklets in Lithuania what to do when the Russians come. Now, we're going to show you that Russians are going to turn south and invade the Middle East, but they may go sideways as well. They've got the military build-up is incredible in Russia. Russia's economy is not that good. People outside of Moscow are not dwelling richly. There's opposition in the streets now. Did you see in the paper? They're opposing Putin because it's been revealed that his personal wealth may well be near 200 billion. That's Mr. Putin's wealth. That's his bank account. He owns the entire Gazprom, so all the oil and gas he gets revenues off. And Russian people are starting to wake up. Hey, what's going on? I can't afford to pay my bills. My house is falling down. So it's not all plain sailing. But we know in the end Russia invades the Middle East. There's a passage in Ezekiel chapter 38. This is even outside sources on the internet call this the Russian chapters of Ezekiel, so there's no argument about it at all. Son of man, set thy face against Gog, which means someone at the top, at the land of Magog, which is one of the old Scythian names of the tribes that settled in Central Europe, Germany, Poland, those sort of places. The Prince of Rosh, this is a revised version, Meshach and Tubal. I've been up there, I've spoken to Russian Christadelphians, I went to 2 Bible schools in Ukraine actually, and I said to them, these 2 names, Meshach and Tubal, oh yes, in Russian these sound mushk, mushk. I went to Minsk, Tomsk, Mosk, Novosibirsk. This is a Russian structure of the language. These are as Russian as our English words for Australia. Moscow and Tubal, the River Tobol or Tubal and Tobolsky. So this is a Russian chapter. Prince of Rus. In Kiev, I saw two statues of Vladimir, Prince of Rus. They were one on the Dnieper River and one in the town. Vladimir was the first Prince of Rus. He Christianized Russia. He went down to Constantinople and said, this Christianity looks pretty good. When I get back, I'm going to Christianize the country. So he marched all the inhabitants of Kiev down to the river Dnieper. This is true. And with swords and spears behind him, he marched them into the water, baptized the population of Kiev, and Russia was converted to Christianity. And you can see the ruins of the old church in a park there, which I took photos of. I haven't got it on these slides. So Rus is undoubtedly Russia. And Prince of Rus is a designation that goes back to 980 AD. So we know what this chapter's about. You'll come against my people Israel like a cloud to cover the land. It shall pass in the latter days. Daniel's image was the latter days. The stone hitting the iron and clay was latter days. So this is all coming together. I said that was Europe. Now we've got the Middle East. We've got Israel now. And so Israel's involved, an invasion of Israel. And I'll bring you against my land. See, notice my land again. It's 4 times. And the nations will know me, that I shall be sanctified in thee, O Gog, before their eyes. What's the purpose of this? Well, to bring peace on earth. I'm just going to skip this slide through. Rosh, Gesenius' dictionary, probably the most reputable. The proper name of a northern nation mentioned with Tubal and Meshech. Undoubtedly the Russians. Undoubtedly the Russians. And he mentioned Byzantine, that is, in Constantinople. Greek writers also mention it by the Greek name Rosh here. That's the Greek. So it's common. It's well known that this is Russia. And in case you don't believe me, while I was up there in Ukraine, a Russian brother showed me his Russian Bible, so I took a photo of it. So there's the Russian Bible, and there's the name of Russia in the Russian Bible of that passage. If you're still not convinced, here's a modern historian, George Vernadsky. He was a professor of Russian history at Yale. During those years, he wrote several books, Origins of Russia, History of Russia. He not only showed that this name designates Russia, but he calls the tribes that came from around the Caspian, Caucasian area, Magog, Gomer, and all these, he said were Japhetites, descended from Japheth. So we've got a lot of evidence about these nations. Divine intervention is ahead. Every one of these prophets ends up with God being revealed. God intervenes. In Ezekiel 38, it's great hailstones, earthquake, destruction with the elements of nature unleashed. You cannot fire rockets, you can't fly aeroplanes while hailstones are falling half the size of a bag of cement, I tell you that. And you can't fire a rocket if the launching pad is rocking like a child's rocking horse. God will nullify all the modern weapons that they are using. And you can't have electronics when the atmosphere is being manipulated by God to freeze their signals. It's bad enough with mobile phones at times. God will intervene in Joel 3, earthquake, great shaking, Israel's rest, and great changes to the topography. Zechariah 14, there'll be a great earthquake. Christ will appear. His feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, and the Mount of Olives shall cleave in two, says that passage in Zechariah 14. Verse 9 says, the Lord shall be king over all the earth. And we know from other passages it's the Lord Jesus Christ. First, the world and Israel will know Christ is in the earth is there, after the battle of Armageddon, where Russia was defeated and Christ appears to his people first. Now, another thing that's happened during this year is the alliance now between Turkey and Russia. Now, the Turks shot a Russian plane down in the early time of the Syrian war, but now they're friends. It's all over gas, and Putin's wanting to run pipelines across. And he sold them their latest missiles, and let me sort of remind you of the Russian Orthodox Church, which the Eastern Church, the Catholic Church in Rome, had a great schism in about the 8th century, or 1000 really, when they split from the Rome, over the power of the papacy and the worship of idols. The Eastern Church had icons, pictures. Well, what's the difference between kissing and worshipping a picture than a statue? It's the same thing. But they split over that, and they've split ever since. And we've got some interesting developments here in the next couple of slides from 2017. What's that? What's the significance of that? Well, there's the Christian cross, and there's the symbol of Islam, the crescent moon. That was from the time of Ivan the Terrible in 1486, the symbol of the Russian Orthodox conquest of Islam in his battle at Kazan in 1486. And it signifies the Russian desire to recapture Constantinople. Now, this is too complex to go into tonight, but that's exactly what Daniel says, that Russia will come against the power in possession of Constantinople. Now, let's have a quick look at Saudi Arabia, because this was an amazing development during 2017. The aged king handed over to, I think, his nephew, Salman, Crown Prince Salman. Now, this guy, he comes out of the blue. He's young. And the first overseas trip Trump did was to Saudi Arabia. Why? Because this guy is going to totally change the picture of Saudi Arabia. He plans radical changes, social and economic, some alliances with Israel and the West. And I didn't have time to make a slide, but yesterday on the news, or one of the news clips that from one of the sources I have, and you have too, many of you, said that he sent him and the King of Jordan, Abdullah, and Sisi, the leader of Egypt, have sent a message to Mahmoud Abbas saying, hey, quieten down. Truly, this is a miracle. These people have fought wars against Israel. 3 of them. Now they're saying, hey, cut it out. Calm down. Because they can see the benefit of working with Israel. Now here again, the hand of God, it says, the hand of God revealed. God has had for centuries, since 600, a cleavage in the Islamic world where they hate the sight of each other, the Shias and the Sunnis. And God has put that there to protect the people. So here's the Arabs all fighting here, and here's Israel sitting there building up technology, building up their cities, giving the world the benefit of their science. I was on a ferry in the Solomon Islands 2 years ago. Russell Bailey sitting there, he was with me. And there's 2 guys with menorah on them, the lampstand. So he said to them, Israel, well, were they representing Israel? They were out there to help the Solomon Islands in fisheries and agriculture. The Jews are generous. In the Syrian war, if a Syrian got wounded, they shipped them across to the big trauma hospital up in Galilee with some of the best trauma surgeons in the world. Why? Because they've been doing it. They've been putting people together, been blown up for since 1947. Best surgeons in the world. But they've got to go back. Why? If they don't, the Syrians will kill their family. And the same down in Gaza. They've rescued Arabs who've been badly wounded, brought them into Israel, patched them up, sent them home, because it's in the Arabs, according to their way of thinking, to keep the problem going, keep the animosity going. But they're fighting among themselves, Shia and Sunni. But this guy's coming to his sense, and he wants to build mega cities, he wants tourists to come, and he wants women to drive. So he's allowing women to have a licence. Okay, I think we might just about fit. See, there's north-south alliances predicted by the Bible in Daniel 11. We've got the king of the north and the king of the south. Now, it really comes from way back in his... Yes, well, I was going to deal with that. We might just have to skip that. But it comes from the division in the Muslim world about the inheritance of Muhammad. One group, Shia say relations to Muhammad through his son-in-law. The others say it from the general, Abu Bakr. So they've been at each other's throats ever since, but it protects Israel. Might grab 3 minutes here. Europe, just a couple of minutes on Europe. There's also an anniversary where the Pope had all the rulers of Europe, the leaders of Europe, at the Vatican in one of the chapels in March. What's in the book of Revelation? You have a woman riding on a beast, which represents the Roman Church. We're told that very clearly. It's a church which punished saints and believers. But look at the. I mean, God makes these things available to us to make the interpretation beyond doubt. There's the most ancient one I could find of the story of Europa, the princess, the daughter of the king of Tyre. Zeus fell in love with her and turned himself into a bull when she rode away, was kidnapped. Well, that's the myth. This is from Palermo, Sicily, dated 580 BC. Here's Time magazine, a few years ago. Here's the euro coin, which is at today. So, long before the EU, Jesus used this symbol of Catholic Europe. Persecutor of his people in power, and it's in power when he returns, because that's the iron. Remember, the iron, there will be in it the strength of the iron. So there's a very historic photo. Here's all the leaders of Europe with Britain out. And Daniel said it will be partly strong and partly brittle Europe. So we've got the strong nations, like financially, particularly Germany, to a lesser extent France. France, another event of 2017, France gets a new president. He's very forward-looking. He's purely European. He's glad to see England go. He wants European unity. His background is finance. He worked for Rothschild's Bank and then the government of Francois Hollande. So he's a pretty progressive sort of guy. And there's the Pope with the 27 leaders of Europe. And they're celebrating an anniversary. As I said, my theme's anniversaries. The 60th anniversary of the Treaty of Rome in March the 24th, 2017. Treaty of Rome was the beginning of the idea of a united Europe and the idea of the church playing a major function in advising. They want the church to have a bit like the Justinian decree of 529, 533, where Justinian gave the Pope particular powers at law in the legal code of the Roman Empire. And this is what the present Pope is seeking now, that as Europe now reforms as a result of Britain going out, that the Pope is right there. I've got other pictures I was going to show you. That he's met Putin. Putin has met the leader of the Orthodox Church in Russia. Pope Francis met the Orthodox leader in Russia. What is going on is unification. The two churches are trying to heal the breach, which is over 1,000 years old. Putin's in everything, meeting everybody. And the Pope is talking to the leaders of Europe. And Daniel's image is telling us that that image is about to stand. Russia's designs, it's already got a footprint in the Middle East, in Syria. Oh, says Mr. Putin, oh, we're taking 3,000 soldiers home. Yeah, really. I bet they're just over the border, about 10 feet, probably in places like the Caucasians somewhere. All his airstrips, all his navy base, Latakia and Tarsus are still there. And as we have seen, Russia can mobilise extremely quickly. Extremely quickly. So Russia sends the Western world a little sleepy message to say, oh, we're pulling out. But they're not. They've still got their airstrips and their naval bases there. So they've got a footprint right next door to Israel, and Israel are nervous. And Iran's the big threat. So whilst we have to stop their friends, there's many more things that happened last year which indicate to us we're on the brink of the return of the Lord Jesus Christ. And the Bible has never made a mistake. All that and all those coincidences and all those little things that brought Israel back into the land as the greatest sign that Christ is soon to return.